Flat Stanley and the Missing Pumpkins. Created by Jeff Round, by Lori Haskins Houran. Picture by Mackie Pemberton. Stanley Lambchop lived with his mother, his father, his brother, his little brother Arthur. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide, and half an inch thick. He had been flat ever since a bulletin board fell on him. "Ow, your flat elbow is so pointy," said Arthur. Stanley and Arthur were squashed in the back seat of the car. "Sorry," Stanley said. He folded himself up like a taco so his elbow wouldn't poke Arthur. "Better?" he asked. "Better," said Arthur. "I wonder where the boys are going. They're in the back seat." The boys were on their way to their cousin Billy's farm. "I envy you. It means I'm jealous of you," Mrs. Lambchop said. 2 weeks of fresh air and the country fair. It means we are so lucky that we get to go to the country fair. That's what she's thinking. "I can't wait to see Billy," said Arthur. "And Aunt Sue and Uncle Bob," said Stanley. Aunt Sue was always baking pies to fatten him up. "I'm flat, not skinny," he would tell her. It didn't seem to matter. So the boys are excited about going to Billy's farm. And it's their cousin's farm. And they get to spend 2 weeks there. So when Mommy said, "I envy you," do you think Mommy is going to the fair with them as well? Maybe not. Let's see. The Lambchops pulled up to a big red farmhouse. "Billy!" yelled Arthur. "Arthur!" yelled Billy. They took off together. "Don't get into trouble," Mrs. Lambchop called after them. Stanley said goodbye to his parents. Uncle Bob helped with the bags. "Ready for some chores?" Uncle Bob asked. "You bet," Stanley said. All right, so here in the middle part of the story, we notice that Stanley's mom and dad drop him off to his cousin's red farmhouse. So that is why Mommy said, "I envy you," because Mommy is not going to the farmhouse. She's just dropping Stanley off. Stanley loved doing farm chores. He was good at it too. He could slide his flat hands under the hens to collect their eggs. They didn't mind a bit. Stanley could slip his flat body between rows to get every ear of corn. "Best picker around," said Uncle Bob. And when Uncle Bob needed to unload hay bales from his truck, Stanley made the perfect ramp. You see? Stanley is flat, so he can make a ramp so they can roll the hay down. "You are mighty helpful, Stanley," Uncle Bob said one night at dinner. "But you are still so thin," said Aunt Sue. "Even with all my good cooking, you must eat another slice of pie." After dessert, Stanley went with Uncle Bob to fix a scarecrow in the pumpkin patch. Well, at dinner time, Uncle Bob says that Stanley has been very helpful. And so Aunt Sue loves to fatten him up. So she's encouraging him to eat another slice of pie. This scarecrow does a fine job scaring off birds. That is the purpose of a scarecrow, to scare off birds, Uncle Bob said. Too bad it can't scare off thieves or robbers. Someone's been taking my pumpkins. That's awful, said Stanley, and right before the country fair. So what's the problem in the story? Uncle Bob is telling Stanley that someone has been stealing his pumpkins. Are they going to find out who did it? Oh, I never show my pumpkins at the fair, Uncle Bob said. Gosh, no, I just don't like my pumpkins disappearing. Hand me the nails, please. Stanley passed Uncle Bob some nails. Uncle Bob fixed the scarecrow's shoulder. I've tried standing guard at night, but the thieves just wait until I go home, he said. Stanley looked at the scarecrow's skinny wooden arm. Then he looked at his own flat arm. Uncle Bob, I have a plan. So Uncle Bob was telling Stanley that he's been trying to figure out who's been stealing his pumpkins, and he's been watching, but every time when he leaves, and that's when the thief comes out. So Stanley has a plan. That night, do you see Stanley? That night the moon lit the sky. Stanley stood still, trying not to scratch. It was hard, since his sleeves and pants were stuffed with straw. Stanley was about to give in and scratch when he saw something. 2 flashlights bobbing in the dark. This way, a voice whispered. The lights grew closer. Stanley held his breath. Then someone bumped right into him. Ow! This scarecrow's elbow is so pointy, said the thief. Gotcha, Stanley yelled. Then he snatched the flashlight and shone it in both thieves' faces. So Stanley caught the 2 thieves, and he took the flashlight and he's shining the lights on the thieves' faces. Let's see. What on earth? Stanley said. Arthur and Billy, why are you stealing pumpkins? It's a surprise for Uncle Bob, Arthur said. Some surprise, said Stanley. No, really, said Billy. The fair is tomorrow. Dad's too shy to take his pumpkins, but I know he could win a prize. Arthur's helping me find good ones. We're going to show them at the fair. So now they solved the problem because Stanley figured it out, because it was Arthur and Billy. They were the one who's been taking the pumpkins, and they've been trying to find the good pumpkins so they can show it at the fair. Stanley couldn't help smiling. That really is a good surprise. How can I help? Well, there's one thing you can do, said Arthur. So it became a ramp, right? So they roll all the pumpkins onto the truck. Uncle Bob found Stanley the next day. Did the thieves show up last night? Oh, yes, said Stanley. Can't see. What on earth? Uncle Bob said. The boys quickly explained the plan. Arthur and I will handle everything. You can just watch, said Billy. What do you say, Dad? Well, gosh, said Uncle Bob. It looks like my pumpkins are going to the fair. That afternoon, they all celebrated Uncle Bob's first ever blue ribbon. Uncle Bob couldn't stop grinning. It means he couldn't stop smiling. This is so exciting. Thank you, boys. I know just the thing to do with this prize-winning pumpkin, said Aunt Sue. Make a prize-winning pie. Stanley, you must eat another slice. The end.